What we'll see today, Seth, I believe, is we got three different things going on in the lake. We've got post-spawn fish, we've got pre-spawn fish, and we've got spawning fish. Because of that, finding what pattern the fish are active in is what we're going to try to do. And the way I do that is I start looking for the post-spawn fish first by going to the deeper ledges and throwing something that's a reactive bait, like a spinner bait. That's going to allow me to see if there's any kind of shad spawning, if they're chasing, if they're active. If that doesn't work, the next thing we'll do is we'll move into the mouths of the creeks and try to fish the humps at the mouths of the creeks or the mouths of the openings, or and we'll do the same thing. We'll start searching for some active fish. After we do that, if we haven't found where there's a nucleus of fish, then we'll start heading to the spawning areas. We'll fish out about 5 or 6 foot looking for pre-spawn fish that are getting ready to move up. And then we'll move into a little bit shallower, 4 to 3 foot, to where the spawning fish, and we'll see if we can't find some fish in one of those 3 stages. So that's what I do in this time of year when you got all 3 phases of the fish going on, and I try to start out on the outer ledge. So let's see if we can't get a bite. The thing that holds these fish out here on these ledges is a lot of times it's just a little bit of grass and certainly bait. So I'm looking at my spinner bait, and I'm trying to see if there's any kind of bait following it, and we call it a shad spawn. And when there's a shad spawn, there's generally an opportunity for chasing fish to come up and really be active and catch some good sized fish and good healthy fish early in the day. The young shad become real active, and that's a Picasso spinnerbait. And I like the double willow leaf. I like gold blades. So it's got a good flash in the water. It's a 1/2 ounce, and it'll stay on the bottom easy. Well, you got the ledge here and you got the ledge there, and this is the main river in between the red and green buoys. So what I'm doing is I got 40 foot behind me, and I'm throwing up to the ledge. And generally the shad will spawn either on the ledges, or they'll spawn at the mouths of the bays or the mouths of the creeks on the humps. And so I'm looking for the shad spawn, and I'm looking for a little bit of grass and a little bit of activity up on the ledge. And generally this is a low light bite too. It's of course today it's overcast, but many times when you have a bright sunny day starting to, oh, there's a fish right at the boat. So that's a post-spawn fish. You can tell it's not very fat, and it's up chasing. And it hit me as soon as we came off the ledge. So, and he hit it hard, and that's a good sign that the fish are active, and that they're going to react pretty well up on this ledge. So I'm sitting in 15 foot of water. That fish probably hit me in about 12.
How old would you say that fish was?
On this lake, they grow about 6 to 8 inches a year, so probably that's probably a last year's fish or close.
Is that a smallish fish for here?
There's a lot of short fish right now, so I would say it's a little bit below average. Yeah. All I did is let that spinnerbait fall down the ledge, and it come off the 4 foot water into the 7 foot water, and he hit me probably in about 12 foot of water.
So you give it about a 3 count, let it drop?
Yeah, when I quit feeling the bottom, I just kind of let it stop a second and let it work itself down the drop. He hit it hard too, so that's a good sign that there's going to be some early activity out here. So hopefully it'll pay off.
Now, is this typically, I mean, you say after the spawn, the fish move to deeper water.
Right.
Is this typically where you find them, in this channel on the ledge?
Uh,
This time of year in the spring?
yes and no. I mean, once the fish move from the spawn, they start spreading the lake. In a lake like this on Guntersville, there's so much grass that grass sometimes dictates where the fish move to. Now, if you're on a lake that doesn't have any grass, generally that first drop off the ledges is where they're going to move to real quick. But a lake like this with grass, they're going to stop in different phases, and it makes it a little bit different. So that's why there's a little bit more searching on a place like this, because you've got to test different drops at different stages as you head towards the edges of the islands and stuff. The best way to do that, I think, is to have a pattern in mind this time of year as to what you're searching for. And like I said when we started, I start on the deep ledge, and I work myself to the backwaters, in the mouths of the backwaters. That way I'm testing different stages of where that post-spawn fish might go to. One of the things I'm doing too is I'm letting the spinnerbait drop to the bottom. So we're throwing up to about 4 foot, and I want to make sure that spinnerbait's on the bottom, because when it's kicking up bottom and grass and mud and shells and things that sit on top is when it gets a reaction bite, and I'm looking for the fish to react to something this spinnerbait does. Generally, the timing of the bass coming off the spawn is about the same time the water's warming up enough for the shad to be spawning. So that's the opportunity for them. There's a lot of feeding that goes on, and they're healing up from the spawn, and they're getting stronger, and they get real active and feed a lot that first week or so once they heal up from the spawn. So it's just a time they're real active, and then that coincides with the fact that you've got the shad spawn starting to occur up on the flats around the ledges and the mouths of the creeks. Lakes that have a lot clearer water, I'm a believer that the clearer the water, the brighter the spinnerbait, and probably people use a lot more whites. This lake always has a lot of stain because of the grass, and you can go with a little bit more duller color and not quite as bright as you might in a lake that has a lot of clear water. But I think the coloring of the blades is probably more important than the coloring of the skirts. I just believe that when you're looking for that shad spawn bite, that gold blades flash better than silver blades. Probably for me, I try to use a sense of feel as to, does it feel fishy? Does it feel like they're still here? Am I seeing shad chasing? Am I seeing activity up on it? I haven't seen a lot of that yet. So that could have been a lone ranger in one spot and would force me to move earlier. Generally, what I'm trying to do is hit 2 or 3 different types of pre or post-spawn types places. So if they don't bite quickly here, we'll probably move 10, 15, 20 minutes down the road and then try another type post-spawn spot. So that's probably the biggest decision a tournament fisherman makes every day, is when does he move and when does he not move. And it's the toughest decision that you make, because you just don't know, if you move too early, if you were right or wrong. It's tough. And all I can tell people is that's just a sense of are the fish there or not. And that's kind of how I look at it. I get all of a sudden I kind of get a feeling, they're not here, let's go. Well, when I'm looking for post-spawn fish and I'm looking for shad, I generally keep going because the fish are going to be scattered wherever the bait is. So this time of year, I'll keep moving more. Now, if we get to the back and we start fishing spawning fish, then I'll do a lot of circles around an area that I'm seeing beds or I'm getting bites in. But out here, looking for this kind of bite, I'm going to keep moving. One of the keys to fishing a spinnerbait this time of year is to make long casts. The longer the cast you make, the more opportunity you have to do something with that bait that a fish will react to. The other thing is that I do a little bit differently than a lot of people. I fish a spinnerbait with my wrist. I'm constantly moving that spinnerbait with my wrist, so I'm getting up and down drop out of it. Some people do it with their arms. I do it with my wrist. Right now I'm moving up a little bit to get out more on top of the ledge. See if they're up on top of it a little bit farther. So I'm sitting in 6 foot of water, throwing up to 4 or so. Just trying to see if they're more on the upper part of the ledge versus the break. I'm not seeing anything chasing my bait, so it makes me wonder if the shad spawn hasn't moved to the ledge yet. It's got me considering to start moving to the humps more at the mouth of these bays we're looking at. Yeah, I move my wrist, just kind of use it like that to get some, and then it drops when you're doing that. And that forces the fish to, if they're following it, which bass are generally followers, when it drops like that, it gets them to react to the movement. Well, let's hit some humps in front of these bays and see if we can get more chasing from the shad, and see if that produces more activity. I know there's a slight shad spawn. It's not everywhere yet because we've had a couple days where we've seen them doing some chasing on our baits. So let's go try the mouth of the bays and see if it'll produce. We're at the ledge, except we're at the mouth of a bay. We'll have a high spot, a hump, 3-4 foot of water. We won't have as deep of water behind us, but we'll have a spot where the shad would be spawning, putting the fish up on top, and we'll be pulling off, so we'll be sitting in 10-12 foot of water, throwing up to 4 or 5, and it won't be quite as deep behind us. All right, so you see the point coming up that we're approaching, and that's the high spot. That used to be an old island. There used to be trees on it and everything, and we're going to sit off the deep side of it over here, and we're going to work throwing up to it, pulling back to the deep. So I didn't see a whole lot of chasing out at the ledge. In fact, I didn't see any kind of shad reacting to my spinnerbait blades. So I'm hoping when I get up to this point here, we'll start seeing some chasing going on with the blades of my spinnerbait. And again, it's one of the search processes that I go through when you got all 3 phases of the post-spawn, pre-spawn, and spawning going on. This is more of a post-spawn spot right here, because I'm looking for fish moving out that are more active in feeding. That's kind of a spawning bay in there. It's got a lot of hard bottom. It's got stumps in it, so it's an area that they would spawn in. And as they start to get more active after they heal up from spawning, this is a spot they would stop in. To me, it's one of the best time of year when the post-spawn fish and the shad spawn occurs at the same time, because it's the time of year that they hit these fast moving baits. They hit it hard, they're aggressive, and it's an opportunity to catch a lot of fish if they're real aggressive. And we're just at the beginning of it now. We hadn't really seen a whole lot of the shad spawn yet. It's a little early. It generally occurs about the first week in May. So we've got about another week before we would normally expect the shad spawn to be strong. And a lot of it has to do with water temperature. We need consistent nighttime water temperature, about 70 degrees, and it's been about 67 or 68 at night, the water temperature. Once you get some consistent 70-degree water, the shad really start moving in and spawning. I'm gonna slow bait down and put something on the bottom. So I'm gonna fish a soft plastic for a few minutes. See if they're up here, but they're not really healed up enough to chase. So I'm gonna go with this is called a missile bait D-bomb. It's kind of a creature bait. It's got a lot of little tail action on it, and it's a great bait for post-spawn fish, spawning fish. It's short, so it'll catch a lot of different size fish too. So I'm going to slow it down and just kind of pull it on the bottom like you would a worm, and see if there's some post-spawn fish up here that just want a slower presentation. Fish is coming at me. A little post-spawn fish. So, what we kind of discovered there is that there's some fish up on here. They're not really healed up enough to be real reactive. And when I slowed down and went to something I could put on the bottom, got a bite. So let's stick with that for a while and see if we can't get another one. Bedding is a really cumbersome process for a fish. You know, they make the bed, which generally is real tough on their bodies. They bleed on the bottom where they're fanning the bottom to make a bed. They get tired. They don't eat, so they get real sluggish. And when I say heal from it, after it's over, their body starts to heal up. They get some energy back and they start feeding again. So, when you start getting into, in the South anyways, the March, April timeframe, you get an awful lot of weather changes. Every 3, 4, or 5 days, there's a different front that comes through. The fronts really affect the positioning of the fish, because when they move up to spawn, if the weather turns cold, a lot of times it moves them back out. If they're in a post-spawn position where they're moving back out and the weather changes real quick, a lot of times it will move them deep real quick, so and slows their metabolism. So weather is a big factor in that March, April time frame. One of the things that I see as I'm out here every day with customers is just that there's so much change. You can't rely on the fish doing the same thing every day, and that's because the weather changes so much. I prefer cloud cover, but certain times of the year, the bluebird sky helps the bite. Now, as we get warmer, the bluebird sky hurts the bite. But in the spring, and a lot of times the fall, until we get some consistent weather, the bluebird sky groups the fish up, gets them active, and helps you. Once we get some consistent weather, then the bluebird sky, in my mind, hurts the bite. Fish are 10 times more resistant to or non-resistant to the sun. So the brighter the sun, the clearer the water, which you have in the summer, the more the fish hide from the sun. And in the summertime, the overcast skies is when they're more reactive. In the spring, the weather warms, or the sun warms the water and groups them up. Generally, you have a lot of rain, so the water's a lot cloudier, has a lot more color in it, and the brightness of the sun doesn't affect them as much as it does in the summer when the water's clearer and you have less rain. Because I'm looking for the post-spawn bite, I start on the outer edge, the deeper side. Now, if I don't get enough bites on it, I may very well work myself around the shallower side. The shallower side, the side closer to the inside of the bay, would produce more of a pre-spawn or spawning fish. So depends on what you're looking for this time of year. The post-spawn bite, the fish are going to be towards the deeper water. You know, we're sitting here in 7 foot of water. We got 10 or 12, a little bit, a couple feet behind us. And on the inside of this, you're going to have 5, 6 foot of water at about the same distance from the center.
So it's just kind of a real gradual transition for the fish as they move.
Yeah, this is not a real sharp drop area like the river channel was where we were sitting to begin with. This is, even though it drops off, it's more of a gradual drop here than it is as you get closer to the river channel. Now, if you also look at that map, you see where that brighter blue and those little red dots are on that map? That's where the original island was. There used to be trees up on that. So, you know, this mapping is so accurate that it shows the original high spot of this island that used to be years ago, and you know, the closer that you get to the highest point of this hump, that middle section, the more chance there's going to be of a fish up on top of it. When you fish a soft plastic, at least what I'm doing with this, because I'm looking for a slow presentation, I'm kind of dragging it on the bottom, just kind of pulling it along instead of speed reeling it. And then I generally fish some kind of soft plastic with a high tip, and that way you can feel the bite easier. You can see your line. A lot of times bass will pick it up and they'll move to one side or the other, or they'll come at you. And with a high tip, you get a better sense of what your line is doing. And I'm just kind of dragging it back to me, trying to keep it on the bottom as much as I can. This area right here is a typical example of how much movement you get in a fish this time of year. 2 days ago, we caught 25 or so fish right up on this hump. And by moving down it from one end to the other, caught one fish and missed one. So it just proves how quickly they move when they're in that post-spawn mode. There's a bite. That's a better fish, a lot better fish. See, that fish is pre-spawn. That fish hadn't laid out. See the bottom of it? So that fish is still ways from laying out. So it's probably got another week or two before it'll go on bed. It wasn't real fat, but it still had the readjust my bait. Missile bait D-bomb. Great little bait. So what I was talking about before, I said if the fish aren't the post-spawn fish on the outside, we'll start moving up, see if there's some pre-spawn fish as we get towards the other side of it. And that's exactly what that fish was, a pre-spawn. There's a bite. Missed him. Let it go before I could set the hook on him. Popped it pretty good. A lot of times when you start getting in the spawning areas, and this is what this felt like. It felt like the fish slapped it with a tail and moved it out of the bed. And that's kind of what that felt like. It was kind of pop with that tail. And then when I went to set the hook, there was nothing there. He never really put it in his mouth. They'll slap a bait out of their bed a lot when they're spawning. So it appears we've already fished, just by movement, the 3 different patterns I was talking about originally. We caught a post-spawn fish. We've caught a pre-spawn fish, and we got slapped out of a bed by a spawning fish. So we kind of have a trail of all 3 phases that the fish are in right now. Typical this time of year, you're not going to find a big nucleus of fish. You just got to keep moving and relocating. Last time we did that show, man, it was the time of year the fish bunched up in groups, and we never moved off that point. You can catch a lot of fish this time of year. You just got to keep moving and changing presentations. And we're probably 10 days away from that shad spawn, I would think, being real strong. And that'll keep us, when we do find chasing fish during that shad spawn, that'll keep us rolling spinner baits, you know, in an area, not necessarily on the same area, but moving up and down like the river channel, or these utilizing one bait and getting a lot more bites as they group up when they do that, as they get chasing. Roll spinnerbait again. I'm off on the edge of this drop out here, so let's see if we can't move something over the edge of it. You see where we are on the map there, you'll see we're getting to where the island starts to drop off. So what I'm trying to do there is say, okay, we're getting to where it drops off to a little bit deeper water, and it should be a place for the post-spawn bite to occur. So that's why I went back to fishing a little bit faster moving bait. There's fish. Post-spawn. Skinny fish laid out already. Maybe a buck bass, but small fish, but post-spawn for sure. All right, so let's go to the spawning area where we got a chance in having them grouped up a little bit more. Bass spawn on a hard bottom. That's what they like the most. So the hard bottom areas is what I look for when I look for spawning fish. Lily pads just do not grow in anything other than hard bottom. They just won't grow in any kind of silted in bottom. A lot of times when they're spawning, you'll see some surface activity too, because they don't even like things over the top of their beds, and they'll chase a bug or a movement or wind or bait coming around them. And I don't see any activity, so it's kind of worries me that maybe they're through in this area, but we'll see. It's funny, some years you'll come in an area like this and the lily pad stems will be half this far out. They'll be more to the back. And then next year they're way out here like they are now. And that's all because the bottom changes. If the bottom silts in and gets soft, they don't grow. If it pulls a lot of the silt out like it did this year with all the high water, then the lily pads spread out. Another type of area that the fish spawn on, you'll see on that map, there's a black line that crosses this way. That's a road bed. And road beds are always hard bottom too, because they're generally gravel. When the lake was first flooded years ago, and they'll spawn on road beds. So you've got hard bottom from the lily pads, you got a road bed that crosses. And generally those two areas create good spawning areas. Oh crap, that's a big fish. That was a big fish. That was a bedding fish too. He picked it up and come right at me. Did you see him?
I didn't see him, no, I saw you.
Oh, he was a big fish.
Heavy loaded on him.
He was a big one. He was coming right at me. There was no feel at all. I couldn't feel my bait at all. I had no sense of anything on the end. That's why I knew there was a fish coming at me. I got the feeling that fish would pick the bait up, was moving it out of its bed, because it really didn't have it good in its mouth, like it was eating it. And they do that a lot. They'll swat it out of the bed with the tail. They'll pick it up, move it. Beds. See if I can get one to react to something moving over the top. It's got a little bulk to it. This is the same swim jig we fished with last year. So, let's see if they'll react to it. I come off. He hit me as soon as it hit the water. I never got a hook set on him. Right in there between those two trees. Let's see if he wants it a second time. Hung on the tree. I'm going to try something else that entices bedding fish. It's a wacky rig. People refer to it as a Cinco look. I'm going to use the missile bait 48 stick bait on it and wacky rig it on a on what's called a shaky head. And the shaky head is it's just real light. I think this is a 3/16. So it's got a little weight on the end. You rig it in the middle. Line needs to be retied, and it drops real slowly. And when around these bedding fish, that Cinco type look is just a real enticing bite, and it's slow when it drops, so they have a chance to look at it a bit. So I'm going to try it around some of these beds. downside of that look is you got that hook exposed that come off, and it will catch everything. So all I'm doing with this bait is I'm just picking it up and letting it flutter down, picking it up, letting it flutter down. There's a Senko bite. Boy, he ate it too. Look how deep that is. That fish wanted it. See the bloody tail? That fish has been spawning. I don't know if you noticed, but that line was going to the right. And never felt him hit it, but I saw the line keep going to the right, so there's a bite. Ooh. Good enough for government work. See those puffs? That's fish moving off the bed around as we're moving through here. Trolling motor is moving them a little bit. That's a good fish. He's fighting like he's a port. That's what I'm talking about now. That's a good solid fish there. It appears that as these fish have gone from 3 different stages, that there might be more fish back in the bedding mode right now than the pre-spawn or the post-spawn like there was, a few days ago. It's changed a little bit, and that's pretty typical of why I hunt 3 or 4 different areas and 3 or 4 different patterns like this as we get into the this time of year until something proves itself out during that day. Then I try to come up with a way to say, okay, here's what it looks like they're doing. We've caught several fish in here, and we've missed several fish in here, but at the same time, it appears that what we found is that most of the fish are in a spawning pattern today, or maybe 2 days ago, we were catching more post-spawn or more pre-spawn fish. So. This is what I'm throwing right now. It's called a missile bait, stick bait. And that's the, when we kind of do the close at the show, I'll have a bag of everything for you to pick from.
Now, do you have any preference on color when it comes to this type of stuff?
Dark.
Anything dark?
Yeah, just dark. I believe that color is a byproduct in a dark lake of matching the watercolor. Now, in a clear lake, you got to use bright colors so that it contrasts for the fish. But in a dark lake like this, most of the time, until that water clears up in the midsummer, I just try to match the water. And if you look at that in the water, the green side of that matches the water the blue side stands out a little bit. So that's just a contrast that the fish see better than what we see in the water. They'll see the matching color to the water will contrast to them, whereas the human eye will look at it differently. Yeah. The way it was moving to the right, I think it was moving it off a bed. It's kind of the byproduct of this slow drop in this wacky rig type look. It has such a tantalizing drop in a bed that's gonna entice a bedding fish, pick it up, move it, swat it, eat it. Well, I gave it longer then because of the fact that it's a spawning fish, and I just knew that if I set the hook too quick, it may not have it in its mouth good. Because we're having so much going on with the fish we've missed, have struck at them out of protection of the bed, or pushed them off a bed, or swatted at them with a tail. And I was just trying to make sure that if he had it in his mouth, that he was bringing it in. So when I set the hook, I'd get him to the boat. So normally, when I feel a bite, I set the hook. I don't give him much time. But I think in the case of these spawning fish today, the way they're acting, that they're so skittish, that I'm trying to give the bait to them a little bit longer than I normally would. And it may be part of the reason we're getting more bites now is just the fact that we've got some water movement, because we've been being pulled. You know, this is just a backwater creek, so that when they pull water, it's going to pull out through that bridge we came through, and and create some water movement. It feels like we got movement where we didn't when we first started out today. Big part of bass fishing. Without some kind of current, bass generally do not feed a lot. And the best of the currents is the one that's created by them pulling water through these dams, on this lake anyways. Some impoundments, when there's no dam that lets out water, the best current is created by wind, but here it's all about the release of the water. The real important key for people when they're fishing is to try to recognize what you were doing, how you were doing it, where you were in respect to the depth. And we were getting those bites. We're in about 2 to 1.8 foot of water. Now I'm out here at almost 3 foot of water, and we're not getting as many bites as we did when we were in closer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to stay out here a little bit until we get back to this point where these bites started. Then I'm going to, if we don't get into some fish, I'm going to get back a little closer to the bank again. So recognizing that the bites came closer to the bank when we first found these fish. So I tell people all the time, from a guiding perspective, you know, when you get a bite, you know, what were you doing? How were you working the bait? You know, were you letting it drop? Were you winding it? Were you letting it sit on the bottom? Were you using a fast retrieve, a slow retrieve? All those things are important to the next bite. And in this case, it appears I'm off the bank too much. We'll see. That might be a young male there that's buck bass, I believe. Fish. As we got towards this point, just because the point comes out, keeping in a straight line, but I ended up moving closer to the bank, a little shallower, and we got a bite. That's a good one. Oh yeah, good fish. That's what I'm talking about. Good fish. Oh, took my worm. He hoodooed me. This is a green pumpkin with a little red in it, so pretty similar to the one we were just throwing. Again, it matches the water, probably matches the water a little better than the one with the blue in it did, because the water has got a little greenish, reddish tint in it. See the coloring, that really matches the water. There's a bite. That fish didn't want to get caught, did he? He was jumping all kinds of ways. Good fish. Threw my worm. It's like a male. I need to retie that. I need to get down there. It's got a rough spot on it. Well, for this wacky rig, I've got a worm rod type thing, which what I use is a medium heavy on something this light, because I want a little bit of spring in the tip so that I can throw it a little farther because it's so light. So this wacky rig, I get a little bit more action out of the tip than I would in a Texas rig where you're throwing a heavier weight. I throw a 7'3". So this is a Duckett 7'3" medium heavy worm rod. With a Duckett 360 series reel, it's a 7-1-to-1 reel, so it has a pretty fast retrieve, so that when you're throwing something light like this and you feel a bite, you can wind it up pretty quickly. With 7-1-to-1, it's gathering about 30 inches of line with one rotation of the handle. The spool is going to turn 7 times for every one rotation of the handle, and that's about 30 inches on a 7-1-to-1 reel. So I've got a medium heavy tip, pretty fast reel, but yet strong enough to hold get a good hook set on a fish. So The worm that I threw with the D-bomb, that's going to be a heavy rod, same length, 7.3, but it's going to have a stronger tip on it, and a little bit heavier line. This has got 12-pound test line. That's going to have 14 to 17, depending on the depth that I'm fishing. It's going to have the same 7-1-to-1 reel, so you want to be able to take up line length quickly. My spinnerbait rod is a 7.3 medium heavy. I like to have a little bit of tip action in a spinnerbait, so I don't get it real stiff, but I do use a 17-pound test line, and I use a little slower reel. So I want the spinnerbait to bounce off the bottom. So I go with a 6-3-to-1 reel, which is going to reel up about 26 inches of line every one rotation. And I like that reel to be a little bit slower and use a little thicker line to feel that bite. All my rods are set up with vicious fluorocarbon line. Fluorocarbon doesn't have much stretch, if any at all, and fluorocarbon gives you the best sense of the bite because there is no stretch. And my swim jig rod is set up very similar to my spinnerbait rod. 6-3-to-1 reel, 17-pound test line, medium heavy rod, and enough action in the tip to feel the bite and not have the stiffness of something that you got to really do a hard hook set on like a worm, and enough speed to reel it up but still stay on the bottom without having to over reel it. So that's kind of the way I'm set up with all my rods. One of the things that you look for in a post-spawn bite, and especially when the fish are moving out to the deeper ledges and stuff, is there any current? And when we were first out there, there was a wind, but there wasn't a lot of current being pulled as far as I could tell from the TVA pulling through the dam. So that has a negative effect on whether the fish feed or not. If there's no current, they generally don't feed as much as there is as if there is a current. So what we look for out there is some kind of current that the fish will get in ambush spots as it pulls the bait in front of them. And in today's what we did out there is we discovered that the current wasn't there, the wind wasn't enough to turn the fish on, but eventually the current came on, and it came on when we were in the spawning beds. We could feel it pull the boat out of the spawning beds, but it had a positive effect on the fish. One of the biggest changes in the natural environment to our whole country, and maybe the world, is the global warming that we're seeing. And even though it's probably just a couple degrees, we're seeing more fronts come through in the south than we've seen 10 years ago. As those fronts come through, it changes every 2 or 3 days what those fish are doing. The fronts have a tendency to push them in, push them out, push them deep, push them shallow, depending on how it affects the water, the current, and the water temperature and the color of the water. So as the fronts move in and out, we get a lot of fish that are just swimming, and they're trying to come up with a pattern that their body is conducive to, and it really changes the bite. One of the reasons that late April and early May and the month of May is generally some of the best 2 months on Guntersville anyways, is because we have more steady weather. The more the weather steadies up, the less transition they have to go through, the better they bite. All right, so here's what we fish with all. We fish basically 4 different baits. Missile baits, stick bait, which is their 48. It's kind of a Cinco look, and we wacky rigged it. In other words, we put it on a shaky head and hooked it directly in the middle to cause us a slow dropping where the ends of the bait kind of flop up and down, and it was the best bait today because of its slow presentation in the beds. It caused them to the bass to get nervous about it dropping into the bedded areas, and it caused most of the bites. So that was the number one fish catcher of the day. Number two was we Texas rigged the missile bait D-bomb. A D-bomb is a creature type bait that looks very much like a crawfish in the water. It's got tentacles, it flops in the water, but it allows you to Texas rig it and put a weight on it, Texas rigged, and slowly crawl it or drag it through the beds. This was probably our number two catcher for the day. So that was a big part of what we did, and so we stick baited with a shaky head, and we Texas rigged with a D-bomb. We started out the day fishing spinnerbaits. Picasso is my sponsor for spinnerbaits. This is their Invis wire. It's got a head that moves on it back and forth. It vibrates well. I like 2 willow leaf blades. I like gold in the blades, either one of the blades being gold or both of them being gold. To me, it gives a lot of flash. And when you're fishing that post-spawn fish that's up on top of these ledges looking for the shad spawn bite, there's nothing better than a double willow leaf spinnerbait. And then the last thing we fished with a tight line jig, swim jig. And this is a swim jig. You put a swim bait on it and you work it over the top of the beds. We caught a couple fish that way with it. This is a 1/2 ounce, but basically you're pulling it over the bed, and you're letting it drop, pulling it, letting it drop, pulling it, letting it drop. And when it drops into that bed, a lot of time is when it gets reaction. So those are the 4 baits we used, and all of them caught fish, with the missile bait 48 stick bait being the best today. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for watching this video and for being a part of what I believe is one of the best sports and fastest growing sports in this country. Bass fishing growing leaps and bounds. I love it. I have a team of guides. We fish 800-900 days a year between all of us. But thank you, people, for being part of it. If you'd like to fish with me, I'd love to hear from you. Call me, email me, go to my website, put in a request. We'd love to take you fishing. We're a bass fishing team. There's 5 of us, and we fish day in and day out. There's basically no closed hours or days. And all my guides have been fishing on this lake for many years. Some of them have been with me for 14, 15 years. We spend a lot of time on the water. We treat our customers well, and what we try to do every day is walk out of the day with a customer with a big smile. Thank you for fishing with us. Hopefully you can find some time to come fishing. Call me, 256-759-2270. That's Captain Mike Gary, Fish Lake Guntersville Guide Service. We got a team of guides that are the best on the lake. Thank you.